This is a very troublesome phenomenon of referring to suicide. And it's a phenomenon that has been exponentially increasing in number throughout the world. So at first, one has to, as a clinician, there's a few steps that we need to ascertain, look at whether a person is indeed having what we call suicidal ideation, thoughts about committing suicide. So steps such as, does the person have any access to things that they could use, tools, etc., to go ahead with it. And once we make sure that the person is away from such artifices or things, then we look for, once we've basically secured the person in a place, at least to know that they are in a physically non-life-threatening situation, condition, set of circumstances, we narrow it down to whether the person has any plans, anything that they've kind of devised. This is, I'll do this and then I'll do this. That is a red flag. That cannot be ignored. And the person has to definitely be supervised, of course, and also emergency medical technicians have to be called in. And basically there has to be a serious intervention. So once those steps have been, those measures have been taken place, and we know that the person is safe, is in an environment that is protective for them, then we apply some interventions. So that's the disclaimer part of this Q&A that I'll be addressing, given this question on suicide. It's very important to consider, to look at carefully at why, or what are this series of thoughts, what are the internal mechanisms at play that drive a person to want to relinquish life, to give up. To narrow it down, of course, there's many, many theories, many people have written many books, many people have come up with their own training manuals. Unfortunately, it's also, unfortunately, it's also a lucrative business. Pharmaceutical companies, drug companies, and everybody else in between. Meanwhile, the person is suffering. Now, I don't want to take away anything from those individuals or entities that really are doing some good work to help in whatever capacity, helping a person who is in that mental, psychological, emotional hell that is driving them to consider or think about going ahead with something like that to end life. Because in Buddhism, as you've heard me say countless times, the human life is such a rare, rare thing. It should never be considered as something that you willingly give up. Because this is the only time period that you have gotten finally after such a long time in samsara, in cycles of rebirth, endless rebirth cycles. Finally, you have gained enough merits to be born as a human being, whether a woman or a man. Finally, you have your capacities to function, to think, to ponder, to contemplate, and to look at how to gain a state of calm, a state of happiness, state of appeasement, state of contentedness, state of growth, constant growth, where there isn't pain, where there's less of a chance for you to experience pain than pleasure. But above all, this is a very rare condition, being reborn as a human being, for us to truly gain freedom from suffering once and for all. And that's what the Dhamma serves. The Dhamma also is about the teachings of the Buddha, for all those new listeners. That's what we mean by Dhamma. The organic, natural order of things. That's another definition of the Dhamma. But through this body, it is possible for us to gain freedom from suffering once and for all. A dog, a cat, a lizard, an elephant will not. Will not. They might be living in a very well posh environment, let's say, well taken care of, such as a cat, an elephant in a zoo somewhere, very, very, protected against poachers or something in Serengeti. But they are not going to rise up over being simply an elephant, essentially. Definitely no chances for them to attain any state of calm, awakening, any opportunities for them to even gain merits, for most. So this body, this human body, is the one. And you made it. You made it. You have this body now. For the rest of this life, however long it lasts, this is your chance to really make it, to really go all the way and attain the maximum that a human being can. Not just a human, but any being can. Now, a human being is in such a unique position, therefore, because the Buddha explains how there is, in most cases, given the karmic residual impact, or the vipakas, the fruits, the outcomes of karma that greet us, not all at the same time, but when we land as a human being in this birth, now the doors are open for karmic results to come in, because that's the substrate, that's the landing zone for the karmic outcomes to land. So long as we're not in the human realm, it will be very difficult for those fruits to land or to reach us, in a sense. That doesn't mean that as an animal you don't get to face your karmic results, or even as a deva, as a divine being. But what I was trying to say is basically, the Buddha explains how as a human being you have almost of an equal chance being, depending on the karma again, to be exposed to both pleasure and pain. Now, why do I say this? Because if you go down the lower rungs of existence, realms of existence, such as an animal, we were saying, the chances of suffering and misery are far greater. And if you go lower than an animal, such as a peta or a hungry ghost, which, by the way, these realms exist, again, they all exist, 31 of them. Simply because you cannot see them, or your high school textbook doesn't talk about it, or college textbook doesn't talk about it, or your favorite podcast doesn't talk about this, does not mean it doesn't exist. They do exist. They're real. So as I was saying, even lower than an animal, now it's going to be far less, if any, chances for you to experience any kind of pleasure. So the halfway point, the Goldilocks point, the range where it kind of balances itself out, is the human realm, where we can have the situations, conditions where we can experience pleasure as well as pain. Okay, having said that, and considering the fact that human existence is a very, very rare phenomenon for us to experience, to be born as someone even on a higher realm, like a deva, divine being, that, even though it has more opportunities for pleasure, as you might have guessed, and some realms don't even have any pain at all, the higher up you go. It also brings with it tremendous danger, being born as a deva. Why? Because of the oversaturation of pleasure. At least 16 realms you have where there's an intense, you're surrounded by pleasure on all sides. Incredible. And they also exist, by the way. But when you have such an overabundance, saturation of pleasure, delight, time passes very fast, no matter how many millions or billions or hundreds of billions of years it might last, that lifespan. And the Buddha has explained this many, many times throughout the discourses, breaking down exactly how long typically an average lifespan of each category of devas are. The person has less opportunities to pause and consider the difficulties of life because they don't exist as far as they're concerned. They're in heaven, right? And given the time span that they have to spend in those individual deva lifetimes, they very often make the mistake of thinking that they are truly eternal. You read any of the religious texts and you see gods, this and that, thinking eternal, eternity, eternal. That's what it feels like, but it's not. None of them are eternal. None. That's why you need the human realm, because it is perfect combination of opportunities of pleasure versus pain. Now, of course, as a human being, we do our best to understand from the pain what it is trying to teach us, the mistakes we are committing. And the Buddha never said, walk away from pleasure, of experiencing things that give you pleasure versus pain. The Buddha never was a masochist or sadist. None of those things. Far from it. So that's why I don't want to get into the devas again, talking about that, but just to capture its relationship to the other realms, the human realm, I mean, its relationship and its significance. So having addressed that briefly, we need to then look at, Why, as I was asking earlier, why do these mental states occur where the person is considering suicide, ending of one's life? Uncertainty is a terrible thing. Not having control is a terrible thing. That phrase, things falling apart in one's life, one after the other, almost like a spiraling downward, 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 where the person is going from bad to worse, from worse to worst. That state of overwhelmment is really saying that the person is no longer in control of the circumstances. That is what the overwhelmed, corrupted mind thinks. Corrupted by invading states of fear, lack of control. And when you have these two, by the way, fear and lack of control, what immediately sets in after that, almost spontaneously when the two are there, is a state of panic. That's why I use the term overwhelming. And it multiplies, it adds up. And when these things are happening, the mind, I said corrupted. Why? Because you get all fogged up in your mind. You cannot think straight. You don't see in front of you. You don't feel your body. In fact, the body becomes the very thread that connects you to pain. At least that's what the deluded, corrupted mind tries to tell the person. Oh, I wish I was out. I want to check out. I want to exit. I want to end this. How do you end? Well, the connecting line. What is the connecting line? The body. Hence, we have this misconception that suicide is a solution. It never is. So this audio is not about promoting suicide, of course. I'm saying it again. Once we have ascertained that the person is not in immediate danger, there's no plans, there's no exposure to any weapons, any tools that they could use. Once we've ascertained that, and the person has also resources. As a therapist, as clinicians, we always would provide emergency phone contact numbers and individuals that they can reach out to, individuals that they know, friends, family, quick, dial up, quick text, quick call, speed dial. So the person has many, many resources. Those things have to also be said. And that's part of the disclaimer also, if you want to call it that. But also it goes beyond disclaimers here, because all these series of Q&As are simply to help people. Above all, help protect the person from their own negative thoughts. And suicidal ideation, as I said, is one of the worst. So we have to address that. We have to protect the person. And that's what we're trying to, encourage people here with this. So the individual who is overwhelmed, underpinned, or feeling like they're sinking into more saturated waters of negativity, where they look at a picture, and a picture that might have captured some wonderful moments from their lives, and now that immediately, because the mind is so foggy, the mind is so convoluted, it's completely smudged. Your filter, your screen. So you look at the photograph and you don't see anything positive. Or if it was a snippet of positivity, suddenly it turns into negativity because the person now is full of sadness. Because when the person is overwhelmed, when they're feeling panic, they're feeling their sense of security leaving them faster and faster, quicker. That they have no control, they have nowhere to hang. So there's this dichotomy that happens. On one end, they know that they're suffering, so they want to end it, and they look at the body as the last bridge. But at the same time, they want safety, they want security. And the only way they know how to experience safety and security is through the body. But a mind that is in such a commotion will not be able to identify, to distinguish the two. That's why you need a voice of a friend. That's why you need a person's voice who's caring, who's genuinely there to listen. So having said these things, and once we have an actual anchor point, the voice of a person on the phone talking to us, helping us to see beyond the confusing clouds in our thoughts, in our thinking, to clear up the foggy screen, to clean up use the windshield of care and compassion and logic and common sense, and to remind the person of so many other good things that are there for them already. Not in the future they will join, no, but they already have. So for that, I am sharing these thoughts now to help. It's like a quick access to a tool, a resource, and what we call in therapy, psychology, intervention. You're intervening. How? You are jumping in and blocking the negative thought cycles. You're interrupting the flow of corrupted thoughts, which are using selectively, by the way, your emotions of pain, your experience of being overwhelmed, and then snippets, cherry picking certain things from life and saying, oh, see that? I lost my job. Oh, see that? I lost my boyfriend or girlfriend. See that? He cheated on me. She cheated on me. You see that? My best friend stabbed me in the back, or my health is not getting better, or everybody's against me. All these nonsense, they're just basically, I say nonsense because they're cherry picked. It's not like they're nonsense because they don't happen. No, these things do happen a lot. But they become nonsense when we cherry pick, when we look at these and completely ignore, drop the mountains of other wonderful things that happen that we simply look away from. Such as having legs. Some people will roll their eyes when they hear me say that, when they're in that state of being overwhelmed. But the body is the key. We don't turn away from the body, want it to end. No, it's the other way around. So, in my experience, working with clients, with patients, with individuals, as well as training individuals who would go and work with different centers in Los Angeles, and in helping, like suicide hotline, where people in having those difficult times would be able to reach out and have somebody, a human being, talk to them. So in my work with all these different individuals, I've noticed that the quickest way to access the person and to help them, to be pulling them out, to allow them to pull themselves out, to be more accurate, is through the body. Now, how to do it? I like to give, even as a therapist, I used to do this a lot, and my patients loved it for the most part. One has to know what to do. That's why I never believed that therapy, true, proper psychotherapy, is like talk therapy. It's not. Anybody who does that, who thinks of it, is missing a huge opportunity, because True therapy isn't that. It's very involved, it's very relational, it's very real. The person sees a connection with another human being and is given tools. So that's what these are, directives. Yes, we need to be directed. That's why the therapist is the smartest person in the room when it comes to giving you interventions, knowing what's going on. And not a person that you like a wall you go and talk to. And that's it, and you walk out and you feel great. This is not an Oprah moment, A therapist is supposed to be skilled at providing you avenues. But first they need to absorb what's coming at them from you. Create a safe space, a term that therapists use, but most of the time have no clue what it is. Because it's become corrupted as well. So anyhow, this is not about modern ways of doing, therapy and all that. So this is about helping. So I help the person by reconnecting with the body. How? Most people know how. Here's a surprise. Most people know how. What do I mean? Typical things. If you know how to do 1 or 2 exercises, physical exercises, you will be able to remove yourself, pull yourself out of that heavy, heavy, dark space of suicidal ideation. Because ideation means what? You are cut off from the body. And what we're suggesting here for you is to do the opposite, to drop back into the body. So, get the person, or you yourself, if you're the person who's experiencing this, or you're trying to help someone, it's always wonderful to show it to them, to model for the person. I used to do this. Wearing a suit and tie and all that, I would, get down on my knees and show them how to do a push-up. And the client would be amazed. Amazed. I would do this also with my schizophrenic patients. The parents would be there, they were looking at, although he's in a different universe, this and that. And I'm looking at the person, I'm looking at the patient, I'm looking carefully. Meanwhile, I'm talking, I'm listening, I'm talking, suggesting, and then I say, okay, here we go. Take off my jacket, loosen up my tie, go ahead, get into a plank position. I'm doing this for them, and the parents would be just like their mouth would be like gaping wide, stunned. Meanwhile, this patient, whom they call hopeless, schizophrenic, suddenly his head turns, looks at you. You're like, boom, right there. You are the focus of attention. Their lips stop moving. They're paying attention. Even if they're not straight away looking at you, they're seeing everything you're doing. I've seen this, I've done this, that's why this is from experience. And I would do 1 or 2 push-ups, and then I would just give the prompt, hey, would you like to do it with me? Guess what? Never has it happened where they didn't jump out of their chair and join me. This person who's living in a different realm, different world, psychological, emotional, they're cut off. So, coming back to the person experiencing suicidal ideation, it is the same in this case. How so? I mentioned the wall squat. The wall squat is basically, most of us can do it. It doesn't have to be 90 degrees at the knees, or the hips. So what it is basic perfect 90 degrees at your hips, where your lumbar spine meets the hips, or it meets your quadriceps, your leg bones, and then your knees and your shin, basically your quadriceps and your shins, lower leg and upper leg, are also making up a 90 degrees. So you're almost like a chair leaning against a wall with your feet firmly grounded. And you can look this up online. It's very, it's common. But what it does is it very quickly activates the leg muscles. If anyone's ever done wall squat, they know what I'm saying. But you don't have to start from a 90 degree. You can do it at a more of an incline where the angle is far wider. So you're almost standing, but just gently bending the knee, but leaning the back against the wall. The wall connection to the back brings your awareness back to the body, slowly, in some cases faster. Again, the presence of a person who is guiding you is really, really important to solidify that connection, because the connection means you are pulling the person who is overwhelmed in that negative space to pull them out from that state of uncertainty and panic and fear. And they feel some semblance of comfort, some elements of security are introduced. Why or how? It is through the body. Through the body. Which is now presenting a totally new narrative. They are gaining confidence. They are trusting the body again. Instead of seeking a way out of life through the elimination of the body. That's another way of thinking about suicide. It's ideation. It's toxic. And then the person says, oh no, Speak to anybody who's ever had suicidal ideation, which includes, I think, based on my experience and understanding, everybody. At some point or another. Most people will not admit, maybe, depending on the culture, etc. But everybody's been overwhelmed. Everybody, to some extent, at some point in their life, reached a point where maybe it might have been a passing thought. Nevertheless, though, they wanted to end the suffering. But then you ask them, you get to or they themselves reach a point in life, in time, where they have the opposite situations presented, and all of a sudden they go, wow, I'm so glad I didn't follow through. I'm so glad I'm still alive. I'm so glad, look at this, look how many friendships I have, so look how many wonderful things are happening. Oh, I'm so glad I did not go through with it. I did not do it because I needed this body. If I were dead, I would not be experiencing these things. The individual will say this. Every single one of us will say this, having gone over the difficult times. So what you're doing for them is giving them a comma, not to finish the sentence. In Buddhism, we never finish the sentence unless we're fully awakened. That's the final period. But death is never the final period. So you're helping the person to engineer one's life, to extend it, and to see beyond this difficult horizon that they think, it's almost like all or nothing. So I gave the example of a push-up or a plank. Push-up everybody knows, but you can just hold the plank, which is the beginning position of a push-up. Try to keep the body straight. Hands flat, feet. If you can't do a full push-up, you can be on your knees, but the upper body, from the knees up all the way to the shoulders and then down to your hands, they have to be in two, straight lines. But if you're able to do a full plank, as I said, the beginning position of a push-up, if the patient or the client or the individual or yourself feel that you got this, you can do this with ease, you need to intensify it gradually, such as raising one leg up straight while the other one remains in the plank position. Or when you're doing a push-up, same thing. Another one is to do jumping. Okay? If you have a bouncer, if you have like a small trampoline, if you don't worry. Most of us who don't have any knee problems or plantar fasciitis or something on the bottom of your feet, we can do slight jumps. So you can jump up and down as if you're jumping rope. But stay with the body. That's the thing. You're not doing this as a series of physical activities that you're disengaged from. No, the whole point is to allow your awareness to sink into the body. In order for the mind to do that, it needs some type of an agitation, some type of a friction, some type of a, what we call in the Dhamma, phassa, some type of a contact taking place. And that's what you're doing. You're facilitating the activity to take place in order for the mind to re-inhabit the, we call it the consciousness or the awareness, to come back down to a comfortable state where it can see coherently what's what. And all of a sudden the person almost like woke up. They're like, oh my, I was in a terrible dream. I don't know what I was thinking when I said I'm going to do this. I'm going to harm myself. But what happened? What changed? The person became alive. You cannot be alive without a body. And definitely there is no appeasement to be experienced when the body's gone. In the case of a person wanting to commit, eliminate life. So you might think of many, many different things. Or let's say a person says, well, I can't jump. I'm on a wheelchair. I can barely move. Okay, can you clap? Can you use your hands to clap, to applaud? If you really can, just try it with so much intensity and force so that you can feel that blood coming in and really getting activated at the surface of your skin, meeting, and the bones moving and the joints and all that, the arms moving. And hear the sound of the clapping that you're making. That also. Because it's a smaller range, smaller portion of the body activated compared to a wall squat or a push-up, which are far more or a full jump. Nevertheless, it does get the job done, as it were. Now, these are tools, and I'm sure you can think of many others. Another one would be running. Just running. I remember when I was overwhelmed from working many, many hours as a high school teacher. And I would be overwhelmed with responsibilities, this and that. And, the life of a true high school teacher is not easy. And working with so many kids, teenagers, this and that, their parents, which make it harder than working with the kids, by the way, or administration and all that. But anyhow, I would come back home after a long, long drive, and having spent over 10 hours that day being consumed by all these responsibilities, you didn't have time for yourself. You didn't have time to even... sometimes I would come and just sit there on the sofa, and I just didn't want to do anything. I'm trying to absorb. I was hungry, but I didn't want to eat, and I would feel overwhelmed. And guess what? I had left close to the door inside of my apartment at the time my running shoes, some gym clothes and stuff. So I would change, my official outfit and then just put on my running shoes, a t-shirt or something, depending on the weather. And my mind was saying, no, don't go. Don't sit here. You lay down just in that. You don't need that. I'm so exhausted. Don't do this. No. You do the opposite. Because what do I have here is just being still overwhelmed. Thinking about the day and how difficult it was, and tomorrow I have to do this again. So I would head out, close the door, have my keys with me. There were no... I don't think I had cell phones then. And I would just run. And run. And run. But after about 3 minutes or so, of just a slow-paced running, not sprinting. Sprinting is great too, of course. But I would run, and then something wonderful, miraculous almost could happen. Would happen, actually. Almost No, every time it would happen, in fact. I have to say that categorically. All my concerns would disappear. My exhaustion would disappear. And suddenly I would be able to run 3 or 5 miles. It felt amazing. And then I would struggle to think about, what was it the thing that really I was, thinking about? I would have to really struggle. And then I would come home and I would say, oh, yeah. But I felt like truly amazing. As the saying goes, I just had my second wind. I gave it to myself. So these are simple tools that anyone can apply, which I'm encouraging the listener to take control of their life instead of being controlled by their thoughts and worries, which by the way, you might have the causes and conditions, but you decide whether to really animate those thoughts, to breathe life to them or not. So engaging the body is you no longer listening to all that junk because they're driving you to end this life, which, by the way, as I said, there is no end to it the way you're thinking. There's no appeasement. A person who commits suicide is not going to get it. In Buddhism, in the Dhamma, it's very clear. If a person commits suicide, they will be going from bad to worst state. There's no appeasement waiting. There's more pain waiting for you. Nobody who's ever committed suicide in that state ever ended up in a good place. Because there's rebirth, remember? Your decision to end life somehow does not change the laws of existence. And when I say law, I'm talking about samsara here specifically, about karma. And eliminating one's life is breaking the first sila, the first precept. That is to harm, to kill intentionally, because there's both intent and the action. And it also has within it a level of anger, what we call dosa. And the Buddha was also clear on what constitutes killing. So there has to be the intent, there has to be a weapon, something used. There has to be obviously the intention, which makes it kamma, of course. Without intention, there's no kamma. So a person wanting to end it is definitely intending to commit something. And it will bring with it all these other things, and it also has to have a victim. In this case, it's you. So you just broke the first precept. How can anything good come out of that? So where you land after that death is not safety, is not appeasement. You end up in a far worse place where your actions take you. That negative action takes you. Even if you were a nice person to begin with in life. So never act on that convoluted state of mind. What your thoughts are psychologically, emotionally charged, toxic thoughts are saying. Connect back to the body. That's where you're going to be. That's not your line of more pain. That's your line of safety. It's the opposite. That's where you will find your way out. You don't cut yourself loose when you're underwater diving in a cave. That line is your lifeline. The body is your lifeline. So who can see this? A person who is calming down, a person who's reconnecting. Because this too shall pass. Anicca, impermanence is there. The Buddha teaches. All things will pass. Yes, you're overwhelmed. Yes, the world is going through such terrible, terrible time periods. We know that. If you're sensitive, if you're caring, if you're appreciative of universal benevolent values, you're in pain. You are in pain. If you're a careless person, if you're self-centered, if you're inconsiderate, if you're conceited, egotistical person, you might not care about the world and its state of inequity and inhumanity and the injustices and the dullness and the people's lack of humanity when they see people in Gaza and in Lebanon dying, being killed. When people say we're going to flatten Beirut, the Israelis are saying we're going to flatten Beirut, and nobody's lifting a finger. Nobody's saying anything. Imagine someone said that about Paris or London or Washington or any major city in the world. Or we're going to flatten Delhi or Paris or your own hometown. Suddenly you become, oh, no, what are you saying? That shows a lack in humanity. Now, when you have humanity in your heart, in your world, in your considerate world, this hurts you. This makes you feel disgusted by humanity. And you're like, what is this? This is not right. And I'm just giving one example. The last several years that we've been facing a world that's been always changing to the worst. And whatever they claim to be something positive is totally stupid things like AI, this and that, things that don't have anything to do with your real welfare and benefit as a human being, really. Because you're continuously being pushed down, overwhelmed by more and more stress, more and more responsibilities without having a break. So give yourself the break. Because this too shall pass. Nothing stays the same, including this deranged time period that the world is going through. Those in power will eventually no longer be in power. This lunacy will go, will pass. So hold your ground, don't lose your humanity. Above all, keep your lifeline intact. Continuously smile to yourself. Say to yourself, it's okay. And say to each other, it's okay. Someone else that you see is in pain. Smile to them. Say, I see your humanity. I greet your humanity with my own. And we're going to go through this dark jungle full of difficulties. We're going to cross over. And we're going to open our eyes in this body still, having protected this body still, in order for us to smile again, to feel the wonders that this life gives, and the great opportunities that it gives for us to understand more, to reach a state of wisdom, and to truly, the way the Dhamma teaches, to attain freedom from suffering altogether through the practice that's called the Dhamma, the Noble Eightfold Path, which has right view, right intentional thinking, right speech, right physical action, right action basically, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectedness of mind, or right concentration. Now when you are overwhelmed by suicidal ideation, guess what? All of the Noble Eightfold Path, every single one of them, the rungs, all of it, are broken. Starting with right view, because you don't have any right view when you're thinking about harming yourself. There cannot be right view and wanting to harm yourself. Okay? And definitely intentional thinking is not there, right? You're having negative thoughts, negative speech going on, so there's no right speech. The action you're about to commit, or you're committing already, is negative, so there's no right action. And there's no mindfulness, there's no right effort, there's no right livelihood. You're not practicing the right lifestyle, essentially. And your mind is all over the place. You're not concentrated on what really needs to be concentrated. That is, this too shall pass. Let me not cherry pick. Life is not all like bad people. No. There are neutral peoples at least. If you go to the restaurant, if you go and see someone on the road or sitting at a cafe, or serving you a drink or something at a cafe, you look at them, they don't have any animosity towards you. They're neutral until you smile and you say, how was your day, genuinely? And they respond back. Suddenly, they're no longer neutral. Suddenly, you're alive. So, rejoin life, but with the right understanding. And remember to treat the body as a lifeline for true appeasement. You never want to cut that. Don't worry, life will come and cut it for you. That's called the end of life. So don't force the hand of life, because that also, it means there's conceit, tremendous conceit, that you know better. No, you don't know better, because you can't see over the hill, the next hill. Your mind tells you, oh yeah, I know. Oh yeah, it's going to be like this. How do you know? Look at your past. Every time you approach the thing like that, you always were met with disappointment. You have to trust life, so long as you're approaching it with right view and right intentions, that is. So that's why we practice sila, that's why we practice virtue. That's the first training, which takes us to the second, which means cultivating the mind, purifying the mind through meditation, through just practicing sati, mindfulness. And then slowly, because of these two, understanding the words of the Buddha, you are also gaining a lot of wisdom, and you're going to see yourself in those teachings. And then you see, oh, others have also suffered. Oh yeah, for some time period. People forget that the Buddha himself suffered tremendously for many years in the later part of his life from back pain. He also had people who wanted him dead, his own brother-in-law, his cousin. He wanted him dead. In fact, he rolled a big boulder down a cliff in Gidja Peaks in India, Rajgir. The big boulder that came rolling down because he knew that the Buddha was going to come up that path to go to his kuti, to his hut. So he anticipated, he knew that the Buddha was going to come from his alms round to eat his food in his bowl that he had collected from the village. Then he would be taking this path. So Devadatta, his cousin, rolled this rock. Unfortunately, what happened was, fortunately that the boulder did not come, it was deviated, but as it deviated, unfortunately it chipped, it hit a smaller rock, which flew, ricocheted, and came and opened up a big gash, a big wound on the Buddha's foot, which started bleeding terribly, profusely. A few other times also he, hired some people, his cousin Devadatta, to archers and things, to kill him. So you have negative things happen, but the Buddha never sat down and said, well, the world is what kind of I'm trying to help the world, the universe, and look at this. After all that I've done for this student, he wants me dead. The Buddha never did that. That would be cherry picking. Plus, what this person is doing with their life, with their choices, they want to do evil deeds. I don't want to take part in it by joining them or being affected by that. I'm not going to ricochet. I'm not going to be influenced by their choices in doing harm to myself or to anyone. I choose a different road for myself. I choose a different path for myself. They will have to deal with their own actions. Let them. What can I do? But all I can do is I can work on mine and establish myself on solid ground. And I need to be okay with myself. That's where you're already going to be feeling appeasement, feeling good, feeling contented with yourself. despite the outside conditions. And as you involve your body more and more and more, subtly wonderful things will happen. You're not going to find yourself all fogged up in your mind, lost in toxic thoughts, sinking in those terrible, toxic, corrupted, convoluted emotions and feelings, thinking that life amounts to that and that alone. No, 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 no. You're going to shake your head and roll your eyes and say, what was I thinking? Once that craziness is over. So once that craziness is over, it means you need to stay with the body. Stay with it. Protect it. Care for it. Engage it. Sukhi hoto.